Good afternoon and welcome to the Demolition Daily Livestream. I'm your host, Mark Anthony. We'll start with the elephant in the room. I have new glasses, and yes, those are yellow lenses, you can see. Now, I know what you're thinking. I fancy myself as a Bono or a latter-day Elton John. The fact is I'm currently spending something like 12 or 14 hours in front of a computer screen, and it's actually starting to cause me some serious damage. These glasses are actually meant to filter blue light and glare from the computer screen, so hopefully that will help solve the headaches I've been suffering for about the past 6 weeks. Can I also just say a big thank you for all the kind comments about yesterday's show. It seems that I'm not alone in my nostalgia for the more mundane parts of the demolition world, like the taste of tea straight from a flask. Just one more thing before I press on with today's show. I'd like to wish my twins, Courtney and Oliver, a very happy birthday. They won't be watching this, of course. Sure, they've got much better things to do. But, you know, that's what you do when you're a father of twins, I guess. So now we've got all of that out of the way. Let's get on with the show. Last night, I hosted the third outing of the Demolition Social Club, and I got to have a good long chat with Scott Laird, a Scot who's relocated to the US, who now works for Independence Demolition. We were talking about this and that, as people do, and surprise, surprise, the subject of the COVID-19 crisis reared its ugly head. We spoke quite a long while, actually, about the impact of this deadly virus compared to the reaction of the outbreak by the UK and the US governments. And then we spoke about the possible impact of the virus on the demolition sector as we start to emerge from the current lockdown. Now, Scott is a very smart guy. So much so that when I finally switched off the transatlantic call yesterday, I couldn't switch my brain off as I just ran through the permutations of what the future demolition industry might look like as we go back to work with the cloud of the coronavirus still hanging over us. You see, once I look past the fact that face masks might become as commonplace on site as hard hats, you find yourself heading off in all different directions in which even the rabbit holes have rabbit holes. So to get it out of my brain and to hopefully allow me to sleep tonight, I thought I'd use today's show to lay out just how the future of the industry might look if, as some predict, the coronavirus decides to hang around indefinitely. So what is your company's stance on the wearing of face masks? If they became a requirement, do you have access to enough of them? What do you do with the used masks? What do you do if someone is caught not wearing theirs? Do you warn them? Dismiss them on the spot? Does your company terms of employment allow you to do so? Another of the key drivers of my train of thought is the issue of social distancing. And the technology exists that would allow site workers to wear wristbands and other wearables that alert them when someone is too close to them. There's two problems there. That technology won't be cheap, and given the current state of the world, it probably won't be particularly easy to come by either. Furthermore, that technology requires those wearing it to act responsibly and to heed the warning from their armband. Now, experience suggests that some will and some won't, which largely renders that technology, at least impractical and possibly pointless. So what's the alternative? Well, even the most vigilant site manager or site supervisor can't watch all of the workers all the time. It's likely, therefore, that we'll be forced to have fewer people on site at any given time. But clients and Tier 1 contractors aren't going to allow twice the amount of time originally allotted to a contract just because it's now being carried out by half as many people. The solution, therefore, I guess, is to operate in 2 or even 3 shifts per day. Now, before we look at the wider off-site implications of a 2 or 3 shift day, think about what that would mean from a purely site level. Do you have 2 or 3 site supervisors to throw at a single project? Do you have sufficient strength in depth to make up 2 or 3 equally skilled gangs? Many inner city sites already have restrictions on start and stop times to ensure that local people aren't disturbed by the sound of demolition. Do those rules get waived? If not, does that mean we have to follow the Japanese lead in which hydraulic breakers are all but forbidden in urban environments? Do we go further still and insist upon silent running, hybrid or fully electric excavators? Does that spell a premature end for diesel? For years, the industry has encouraged workers to travel together to reduce fuel costs and to minimise their environmental impact. But as a demolition contractor, are you now required to provide sufficient vehicles for workers to arrive on site while retaining social distancing? Is that one van per man? Is someone going to record the temperature of everyone as they arrive on site and again as they leave? Who's responsible for gathering and collating all that information, just in case, God forbid, there is an outbreak that could be traced back to your site? Will each site now require an occupational nurse or a health professional? If you're running 2 or 3 shifts per day, will you need 2 or 3 daily briefings? 2 or 3 toolbox talks? Do you have qualified people that are sufficiently experienced to take that on? How do you ensure that workers on a night shift are fed after all the local eateries have closed? Can you allow workers to visit local eateries in the first place? Does that mean that you have to provide round-the-clock site canteens? Who'll run that? Who'll pay for it? Will those working at night require special training or special equipment? Will the site need to be fully illuminated? How will your neighbours feel about that? They might be able to close their curtains to keep out the light, but what about the noise from the lights generator set? Does that have to be electric powered too, like the excavators we were discussing earlier? Are there enough of those to go around? Assuming we're all taking this as seriously as we should, site cabins and facilities will need to be cleaned and disinfected between shifts. Machine cabs will require the same treatment. Who's going to do that? And how long will it take? At the end of their working day, are all workers going to pass through a decontamination area to ensure they're not taking any potential infection home or onto public transport? Does all PPE become disposable? If not, how do you ensure that your workers aren't infecting each other by sharing hard hats or gloves? It's surely a terrible idea to insist that workers take potentially contaminated PPE home with them each day. Clients will need to be told that in addition to projects taking longer, it's going to be significantly more expensive. Virtually everything I've discussed above comes at a cost, and it doesn't even take into account the likely hike in insurance premiums as demolition firms seek to protect themselves against a claim for infection. Now, literally, as I was preparing for today's show, the good folks over at Veritas Consulting sent me a message containing a list of items and issues to consider. Some I've already covered, but check this out for a list. You need to have in place steps to monitor and enforce 2-metre social distancing, limiting the use of welfare facilities, site entry and separation of workers, social distancing while waiting, displaying the correct signage, extra washing facilities, keeping a distance during site briefings, restrictions inside smoking shelters, restrictions in the site office, arrangements for first aid treatment, the need for access and egress routes around the site, limiting the number of workers on site on a daily basis, and staggering working trades as they arrive on site as well. Mind-blowing, isn't it? And all of that is really just at a site and a company level. Think of the wider impact if the nation switches to a 2 or 3 shift work program. And I'm speaking here specifically about the UK, but this applies wherever these restrictions have been in place. You think about a rush hour now. If you've got 2 or 3 shifts per day, the rush hour could last pretty much all day and quite possibly part of the night too. Now, to avoid this, the government might insist that deliveries to retail stores takes place between certain hours, assuming, of course, there are still retail stores in existence when all this is over. If there are fewer retail stores, could they be converted to help the housing shortage? If that's the case, that's demolition work waiting to be done. Do local cafes and cafe owners extend their working hours to help feed demolition and construction workers that are toiling through the night? Having earned bugger all cash for the past 2 or 3 months, they could probably use the money. I could go on and on and on, but I don't know about you, my head is starting to hurt now. And besides, given that many construction firms have pressed ahead with work despite the health warnings, and that some have even threatened to sue or dismiss specialist contractors and demolition contractors that were unwilling to work during the pandemic, my guess is that virtually nothing will change. Those clients and contractors have repeatedly shown a willingness to place wealth above health. And even as the UK COVID death toll marches inexorably towards a horrific 30,000 total and beyond, they've given no indication whatsoever of a willingness to change. Beggars belief, doesn't it? That's the world we're living in at the moment. Obviously, some of that is extreme. But when you start thinking about it, and then the knock-on effect of each step that you take, as I say, speaking to Scott, and good morning, Scott. I can see you're in the chat there. Speaking to Scott last night, he's working on some very big jobs, power stations, and it's possible on a job of that scale to separate people and to move them around and that kind of thing. But you think about an inner city job in London, in Birmingham, in New York, or wherever in the world. How do you go about separating people sufficiently to make them safe? It's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough. Good morning, Paul, or good afternoon, Paul, in your case, actually. Good to see you there. I don't know if Simone Bruni is still here, but if she is, good to see you, Simone. Haven't seen you for ages face to face. I hope all is well down in New Orleans. I was speaking to Scott last night about the next NDA convention, which is scheduled to be in New Orleans. If I can be there, I most certainly will, and I will be knocking on your front door. Just had a comment in from Scott. Mark, this idea of deliveries being made through the night has been going on in LA for years. Reduce the congestion. To my mind, it makes perfect sense. And if ever there was a point in time where that could be put into action, now is surely that time. I think as far as rules and regulations are concerned, all bets are off at the moment. So if the government wanted to make those fairly substantial and fairly sweeping changes, now would surely be the time. And at least they wouldn't even have to take responsibility for it. They could just point at the COVID crisis and say, that's why we've done it, just deal with it. And I'm sure we'd learn to adapt, much as we've all learned to adapt with the lockdown that's in place at the moment. Here in the UK, given that we've got a couple of American viewers at the moment, here in the UK, it looks likely that we are going to start lifting our restrictions as of Monday next week. We don't yet know exactly what that lifting of restrictions is going to look like. But as I said, given the fact that a lot of construction has been going on, regardless of the potential health risks, my guess is that will see even more sites opening up. My personal feeling is that's still very, very unwise, but I'm not a medical expert. I'm very, very conscious of the fact that a lot of the people that are watching these live streams each day are working men and women who are desperate to get back to work, to start earning some money. It's a terrible position to be in. I think we all know that going out and about and possibly going back to work carries with it a risk, but we all need to feed our families as well. And I can't even blame governments. I mean, I don't think our government has done a particularly good job in the long run. I don't think the US government has done a particularly good job either. But then who is prepared for something like this? I realise it's been flagged up years back, but nobody expected this. And even to the point where the lockdown started, I was in Vegas at the time that the lockdown started, and even then I was looking at it thinking it might be a week, it might be 2 weeks at worst. Well, here we are 8 weeks later, and I'm still looking out the window wondering if I'm ever going to get to go fishing again. But in the grand scheme of things, that's a minor concern, given the fact that so many people have died, and unfortunately so many more are going to. The petty inconveniences that I'm suffering are just pale into insignificance. So I think I'm going to call it a day there. My understanding is there might even be some birthday cake waiting for me if the twins haven't eaten it all. So I'm going to sign off for the day. Really appreciate you all being here. As always, stay safe, look after yourself, look after your family, your friends and your colleagues. I'll be back here again at 3 o'clock tomorrow for the last show of the week. We've got a nice big packed program for you next week. I've got a couple of specials coming up as well, including one, I'm doing this off the top of my head, but I will confirm this. I think we've got one on Monday morning at 10:30, which if you're not at work, and I know a lot of you aren't, you might like to tune into that, and let us have your comments on that. But I'll tell you more as and when we get that confirmed. But in the meantime, stay safe. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. Thanks for the comments and the support. Thanks again for all the watching yesterday. And I will see you again very, very soon.